Hi, today we're going to go over how to install a package of bees, and nothing can go wrong. Let's get started. A package of bees weighs about 3 pounds and contains 10,000 bees, plus a laying queen in a small little box placed inside the larger box, and a feeder can of sugar syrup, which feeds the bees while they're on their trip. To get the bees off to a good start, we have a container in which we're putting 1 gallon of water mixed with 7 pounds of granulated sugar to create a sugar syrup to feed the bees until they get out and start to collect their own nectar. And we're also adding 1 rounded teaspoon of the antibiotic fumagillin B, which is used to fight the disease nosema, which attacks bees. We were also lucky enough to have a friend who is a beekeeper give us a couple of foundations full of honeycomb that the bees can feed on as the bees set up to get started and collect their own nectar. Okay, so here's our plan. We're going to put the queen in the bottom super and then pour the package of bees into the bottom super along with the queen. Then we're going to put the second super on top. The second super will contain the sugar water solution to feed the bees, along with the honeycomb foundations that the beekeeper gave us. Half an hour before you open that bee package, spray the bees with a mixture of sugar water. This will keep them from flying and get them to calm down, which will make a big difference when you go to open the package. Now, using your bee tool, carefully pry up the wooden cover on the top of the bee package. Directly under the cover, you'll find the metal syrup can, which fed the bees during their trip. Using your bee tool, carefully pry the can up and then gently remove it and replace the wooden panel to discourage the bees from flying. Near the hole in the package, you'll find a tab stapled to the top of the box. Gently pry up the staple holding the tab in place, and then gently lift the box holding the queen bee out of the package of bees. There'll be a small cluster of bees hanging on to the outside of the box, but don't be concerned. It's unlikely that they'll fly. Take a moment to look at the box holding the queen, which is often called the queen cage. At one end, there'll be a cork, and inside, there'll be a circle of sugar, which the queen feeds on, along with her attendants, during the trip. Using your bee tool, gently pry the cork out from the end of the queen cage, and then, with a nail, poke a hole through the sugar to allow the bees to more easily free the queen. You just want to poke a small hole because the sugar will delay the queen's release, helping to ensure her acceptance by the other bees. Make one last inspection that the queen is in good health, and gently brushing the bees away from the queen cage, place the cage between the 5th and 6th frames, and then gently press the frames together to hold the queen cage in place. Now, remove the package lid and shake or place approximately a cupful of bees onto the queen cage suspended in the hive. This will help to keep the queen from getting chilled. Now it's time to add the rest of the bees. Turning the package upside down, gently shake the bees into the hive. If you spray the bees with sugar water a half an hour before you pour the bees into the hive, they'll generally just pour into the hive just like honey, and they'll have very little tendency to fly. By lightly tapping the sides of the box, you can get the rest of the bees to shake loose and get as many of the bees into the hive as you can. Place the box with any remaining bees in it in front of the hive so that the bees can find their way into the hive. The freed group of bees will soon begin to scent. Their heads will face the entrance and their abdomens will be raised with their wings fanning, and they'll release a special scent from their glands to attract the loose bees to the hive. To encourage the remaining bees to move into the hive so you can close it up, just take a smoker and gently smoke the bees. The smoke will encourage the bees to move into the hive to engorge themselves on honey. This will make it much easier to close up the hive. Another trick to keep from hurting the bees is to use a handful of grass as a brush and gently brush the bees away from the edge of the super and onto the frames. This allows you to add the second super, which contains the honeycomb and the sugar syrup, and gently lower it in place without hurting any bees. The next step is to place the inner cover on the hive, with the rim side down to allow extra room above the top bars for the bees. Gently lower the inner cover into place, being careful not to crush the bees. Lastly, lower the outer cover into place, gently lowering it into place so that you don't hurt the bees, and leaving space on the front of the hive so that bees can enter and leave the escape hole on the inner cover. Leave the hive undisturbed for 5 days. After 5 days, you can remove the cover and the top super and check the queen's cage. If the queen has left the cage, gently remove the cage. Check to make sure that the bees have enough sugar water in their feeder and refill it if necessary. If the queen is still in the cage, pull off the screen and let her walk into the frames. That's all it takes to get started. Check with your local beekeepers on tips and hints for improving your beekeeping techniques and for further enjoyment of the hobby.